Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really getting into the story of the Maceo Organization.
Yeah, it's quite a tale. A criminal group that basically ran Galveston, Texas for much of the 20th century.
Pretty much. We're talking roughly the 1920s all the way through to the 1980s in terms of their influence.
Right.
And for this deep dive, we've pulled together information from various sources compiled into what we're calling MaceoOrganization.pdf.
Okay.
So our mission today really is to figure out how this organization got so powerful, and just how deep their influence in Galveston actually went.
Sounds good. Where do we start? The beginnings.
Yeah, let's start at the start. So the Maceo brothers, Sam and Rosario, they didn't just appear out of nowhere. They started within another gang, right? The Bleach Gang?
Exactly. Back in the 1910s and into the 1920s, that was the scene they emerged from.
And the Beach Gang, it had established leaders already. You had Ollie Quinn, Irish-American,
Yeah.
and Dutch Voigt, German-American. That were the guys controlling the beach area of Galveston.
Right. They were the sort of top dogs there.
Right.
But Galveston wasn't, exclusively theirs.
No. Who else was involved?
Well, they had a major rival, the Downtown Gang. That group was led by Johnny Jack Nowns and George Musey.
Ah, okay. So there was already this tension, this competition for control of the city's underworld.
Definitely. And this is where the Maceos start to become, significant. Ollie Quinn, one of the Beach Gang leaders.
Yep.
He apparently saw something in Sam and Rosario Maceo, started mentoring them, kind of took them under his wing.
Interesting. So he sort of cultivated them?
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And it paid off for the Maceos anyway. By the late 1920s, they weren't just members anymore. They'd climbed the ranks.
Climb them how fast?
Fast enough that they effectively took control. The Beach Gang basically became the Maceo Organization.
Wow. So what happened to Quinn and Voight? Were they just pushed out?
Not exactly pushed out, it seems.
Yeah.
The source suggests they became more like partners. Still involved, but, the Maceos were clearly in charge now.
So a definite power shift.
Yeah.
And they weren't content just taking over the Beach Gang's turf, were they?
Oh, no. They had bigger ambitions. By the 1930s, they really consolidated their power.
How so?
They essentially drove the Downtown Gang Nowns and Musey completely out of Galveston. Just cleared the field.
Establishing total dominance.
Pretty much. And that really paved the way for what you could call the Maceo Empire.
An empire built on, well, let's be frank, criminal activities. Quite a range of them, based on our source.
A very wide range.
Yeah.
The document lists things like racketeering, illegal gambling, which became huge for them, prostitution, bootlegging during Prohibition, obviously.
Right, the classic.
The numbers game, like an illegal lottery, bribery, massive political corruption, even an electoral fraud.
Wow. It doesn't stop there, though, does it?
Nope. Extortion, money laundering, smuggling, and even drug trafficking are mentioned. It was a full-service criminal operation.
And Sam Maceo, he seems like the key figure here. The source says he expanded an extortion system that Quinn had started.
Yeah, it sounds like Quinn had the basics, but Sam really systematized it. Made it bigger, more organized, probably more profitable, and intimidating.
So refining the criminal tools. But they didn't just rely on muscle, did they? The political connections seem vital.
Absolutely crucial. They were smart enough to know that lasting power meant having friends in high places. They actively cultivated political ties.
And not just local council members. We're talking big names. Texas Governor James V. Allred.
Yep, mentioned specifically. Along with William Lewis Moody Jr., who is a very powerful figure in Texas, and even a one-time Galveston mayor, Herbert Y. Cartwright.
How exactly did those connections work for them? Did they get laws changed or just blind eyes turned?
Probably a bit of both. The source doesn't detail every quid pro quo, but having allies like that, well, it means protection from serious investigations, right? It means favorable decisions, permits maybe, just making it easier to operate without interference.
And Sam Mayo himself, he had a certain image, didn't he?
Yeah, the source describes him as like well-dressed, very charismatic, probably helped him build those relationships. His brother, Rose, apparently had a different vibe, though it doesn't really specify how. Less front-facing, maybe.
Maybe. But it's fascinating. This political influence, it wasn't just about protecting their illegal stuff, was it? It actually shaped Galveston.
That's one of the most interesting parts, I think. Yeah, their influence reached into Galveston County, state government in Austin, maybe even D.C., and they used it to, push for improvements in the city.
Improvements like what?
Infrastructure, attracting investment, things that helped turn Galveston into a major resort, a cultural center, an economic hub even.
So it's this weird paradox, a criminal organization actively helping to build up the city they're exploiting.
Exactly. It really makes you think about power, you know? Legitimate, illegitimate. Sometimes the lines get incredibly blurry, especially when it comes to shaping a community's development.
Yeah, really complex. So Prohibition ends in 33. Did that hurt them? Or did they just pivot?
They pivoted. Very shrewdly, actually. San Maceo saw that gambling was where the real sustained money was.
After the booze became legal again.
Right. So he doubled down on gambling, built this massive illegal gambling empire, not just in the city, but across Galveston County.
And they started networking outside Texas, too, didn't they? The source mentions some pretty infamous names.
Yeah, associations with guys like Mo Dalitz, Frank Nady, part of the Chicago outfit, and Albert Anastasia from New York.
Wow. Heavy hitters. But they weren't operating in Galveston, right?
That's what the source stresses. These guys weren't setting up shop in Galveston. It was more like alliances, maybe connections for supply, for information, maybe mutual respect or non-interference pacts. It plugged the Maceos into that national network.
Okay. And locally, they weren't just running backroom poker games. They had actual establishments, clubs, casinos.
Oh, yeah, very famous ones. The Turf Club, the Maison Rouge.
And the Balinese Room, right? That's the really iconic one.
Definitely the most famous. Perched out over the Gulf on a pier. Plus, the Hollywood Dinner Club. These places were legendary.
And they weren't just about gambling, were they? They were like high-end entertainment venues, big bands, fine dining.
Exactly. They drew in tourists, celebrities, the local elite. It made the Maceo operation seem almost legitimate, part of the Galveston glamour. It really embedded them into the city's whole identity.
So they had this long run, decades of dominance, really. But like all empires, it couldn't last forever in that form.
No. Things changed in the early 1950s. That was the beginning of the end for the Maceo era itself.
Because both brothers died around then.
Right. Sam Maceo died first in 1951. Then his brother Rose passed away in 1954. That created a power vacuum, naturally.
And who stepped in? The source mentions the Fertitta Group.
Correct. The Fertitta Group essentially succeeded the Maceos. Anthony, Vincent, and Frank Fertitta.
Okay, the Fertittas. And they didn't just keep things running as usual in Galveston, did they?
No, they made a pretty massive strategic shift. They decided to basically relocate the core of the organization.
Relocate where?
To Las Vegas.
Okay, to Vegas.
Right, where gambling was actually legal. Nevada had legalized it way back in 1931.
Exactly. It seems like a logical move, doesn't it? Why keep running illegal operations with all the risks when you can go where your main business is above board?
Makes sense. Were there other reasons? Maybe? Was the heat getting too much in Galveston by the 50s?
That's possible. The source doesn't explicitly state that, but post-war America was changing. Attitudes towards open gambling might have been shifting in Texas. Plus, Vegas was booming. It was the land of opportunity for anyone wanting into the casino game legally.
A fresh start, maybe? With potentially less baggage?
Could be. And they didn't just dip their toes in. They went bid in Vegas, got involved in some major casinos.
Which ones? The source lists quite a few famous names.
Yeah, they had interest in places like the Stardust, the Tropicana, Circus, the Sahara.
Wow. Icons of the Strip. Absolutely. And the Fremont downtown, which Frank Fertitta Jr. actually managed for a time.
Frank Fertitta Jr. That name is still huge in Vegas today, isn't it? Station Casinos.
That's the one. Frank Fertitta Jr. later founded Palace Station, which grew into Station Casinos, now a massive operator, especially focused on the Las Vegas locals market.
So you can draw a direct line from this Galveston crime family through the Fertitta succession all the way to a major legitimate casino corporation in modern Las Vegas.
It's really quite a journey, isn't it? From bootlegging and backroom gambling on the Texas coast to the legitimate boardrooms of Vegas casinos.
Absolutely incredible. So let's just quickly recap the arc here. You have the Maceo brothers, Sam and Rose, starting in the beach gang in the 1910s, 20s.
Right, learning the ropes, getting mentored by Ollie Quinn.
Then taking over, pushing out the rival downtown gang by the 30s.
Yeah, and building this huge, diversified criminal empire. Gambling, bootlegging, extortion, all underpinned by serious political connections.
Connections they use not just for protection, but kind of bizarrely, to help develop Galveston into this resort city.
That strange paradox, yeah. Leading right up to their deaths in the early 50s.
Then the transition. The Fertitta Group takes the reins.
Anthony, Vincent, Frank Fertitta.
And they make that key decision. Move the operation, or at least its future, to Las Vegas.
Leveraging their experience, their capital, whatever they brought from Galveston into the legal casino industry there, getting involved in major properties.
And ultimately leading to Frank Fertitta Jr. founding Station Casinos.
Yeah.
It's a wild evolution from, illicit activities in a Texas town to fundamentally shaping the landscape of Las Vegas.
It really is. And it makes you think, doesn't it? About the legacy of organizations like this.
Yeah. What kind of long-term impact do they have on the places they control? You see the obvious things, maybe the buildings they financed or the industries they fostered.
But what about the less tangible stuff? The local culture, the political atmosphere, the sort of historical memory of a place. How much is shaped by that period of, let's call it, alternative governance?
Right. And this whole story, this deep dive, what does it tell us about those lines between legitimate power and illegitimate power? They seem so incredibly blurred sometimes.
They really do. How one can morph into the other, how they can coexist, even feed each other.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to chew on. A fascinating slice of American history, that's for sure.